I think this is probably going to come up with a lot of people from the group, but as the police, we're available 24/7, and we're the first people that are called for just about you name whatever happens, and we're called to it. And the things that we really want to get out of the business of are dealing with the addiction issues, the social detox issues that are needed, the homeless issues, the mental health issues in our community. We're very happy to try and get people to where they need to be, but sometimes the police are not the right person to be there for the first contact with some people. Rather than being able to calm people down, sometimes they see the police and automatically get more agitated in certain things. Now I know West Central is very, very close to getting us a team of people that can come out and do some of those proactive things, and that's what we would do.
Okay, right. Yeah, when you were talking about kind of the core mission being law enforcement, and then all those other things you described, it's like, well, we'll be there, and we are there, but those aren't quite central to what you'd otherwise be, trained to do and wanting to do. But like you said, you're so oftentimes the first ones who are called to show up. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah.
And I'll go next and kind of echo what Dave said. As a sheriff, I'm responsible for a jail. And so kind of in line with what Dave's saying is sometimes the very problems we see, we are the least equipped to fix those problems or deal with them. And, so like when we look, like Dave's talking about addiction and homelessness and, intoxication. And ultimately, on the jail side, the jail becomes the warehouse of people. And, I've been saying for many years, we went away from institutionalization, and that was a good thing to do. But the problem was we weren't prepared for that element of society that had to be someplace. And so we started putting them in jails, which is the worst place we could have put them. We do put programs in place, but again, we don't have the resources to go out and get in front of the problem. We're the end of the line, and oftentimes by then it's too late.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you think about you're talking about in large part the inefficiencies that exist. Well, we'll be there. We can house people, but that's not at the best for people we're trying to serve or help. Yeah, right.
It is related to that. Ministry on the margins, we take Matthew 25 seriously. I was hungry, you fed me. It's just do it, dang it. Or whatever words you want. But we really take that very seriously because I don't care what you did in your past. I don't care whether you are worthy or not. You deserve to be fed. You deserve to have clothing. You deserve to have shelter because you're a human being. When we talk, what we have done is, in some ways, I think what you're saying is, Kelly, we've criminalized behavioral health issues or addiction, and we've turned it over to the criminal justice department. When you talk about a pressing need, it is that very basic, I was hungry, you fed me, you didn't even need to show ID. And so I'm pretty passionate about that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good.
Okay. I just wanted to, I touched a little bit on our core population earlier, but I also wanted to touch on our core functions, and one of them being emergency services, assessment, referral, rehabilitation and recovery, and then community education. And I think around that, some of our pressing issues then, we have several of them, but I put down transportation as one, getting some of our clients to and from programming. We provide a lot of that, but then a lot of them are, high need. Maybe don't have a ability to either drive or afford to drive, those kinds of things. Recovery, and what I mean by recovery is supports and social activities. Peer mentoring is huge and is something that we're really looking for to help support us under the peer support through the behavioral health department. And then also recovery housing for persons in long-term recovery tends to be kind of an area where we struggle. We do have residential facilities, but that isn't necessarily, right now, we need to focus on our emergency services, our crisis services, getting people in, getting them stabilized, bringing them to us instead of to jail type of thing, and getting them stabilized and then getting them into wherever it is they need to go to there, whether it's back to their home, apartment, or is it some sort of long-term, a little bit longer-term supported recovery environment of that sort. So like I said, we do have some of the licensed ones that we operate, but we're looking for housing beyond that. And I know, I came from the Fargo area, and they have some options in Fargo that they're trying to bring out this direction that I think would be vital. But not only that housing then, but I talked earlier about the peer support piece. That's really important. So if somebody is in recovery themselves, whether it be mental illness or SUD, it doesn't matter. They can get some training, and they can lend a hand, and they can even get paid for it if they want to be. And then offer those supports to some of the other folks that are coming in and kind of mentor them through the recovery process.
And so much of that mentoring and coaching and that sort of a thing is we've got such a wealth of life experience. In any given setting, you just say nothing of a church like Good Shepherd, right? That can intersect people's lives who need some guidance, need some friendship, need some skills, need some encouragement. I mean, those are so central to that matter of recovery or the matter of transition or whatever. Yeah. Huge thank you. Yep. Yeah, Jennifer.
I think just to add on to what Brad had mentioned, I know from the hospital standpoint, after 5 o'clock, there really are not a lot of resources available to people, and I think that's where, the calls to law enforcement come in, and then when there's an issue, because they don't know what to do, we see a lot of folks, say, well, I'm suicidal, and that gets them brought to the hospital where we further admit them, so they basically have a safe place to be, whether they're truly intentionally suicidal or if it's just, I don't have anybody or any way to get my needs met at this moment, so this is what I'm going to do to get them met. And we see that a lot, which I'm sure, the law enforcement does too on the street. It's repetitive people. It's, the same folks over and over again, and whether that's homelessness issues or, they burned the bridges that they had for support people, etc. So that is, I think, emergency and after hour services, to Brad's statement too, is significant.
Yeah, for so many, right? I mean, things have gotten turned upside down, and so then they have exhausted, oftentimes, what the rest of us might presume to be normal aspects of life or your circle. Yeah. Thanks. Nancy.
So I have kind of a list that goes from one thing to another here. For example, I think that we really need to try and figure out a way to incentivize or get commercial recycling going in town here. It's I hesitate to say that we would, force it by ordinance, because typically that isn't accepted very well. But 2/3 of our waste stream out of the landfill is commercial waste. So that begs the question, how much of that is recyclable? And how much space could we be saving in the landfill? Because we're running out of space at the landfill, and we'll have to have more space. And you don't want to site a whole new landfill. I hope that doesn't happen in my lifetime, because it's incredibly expensive. And, where do you find the land and get the permitting and building the cells and all of that? So our residential recycling has been extremely successful. Really quick, if I could give you a visual in the 4 years since we started. Picture a football field, including the end zones, 21 feet high, full of recyclable material. That's what we've, in our city, just from our residential recycling pickup, have kept out of the landfill. So if you say, well, yeah, but that's a lot of water bottles with air in them. So if you compress that like you would in the landfill, it would be 11 feet deep. So that's a significant amount of space that we've saved. So just think if we could add the commercial waste to that as well. So then we have lots of considerations at the commission table. There's growth-related infrastructure. For example, building out roads like 43rd Street. You know, that's a rural county road right now, and it's getting really dangerous because there's a lot of really fast traffic on it. So, you know, projects like that, we've tried to look forward as best we can, and we're looking at some more modern funding mechanisms. And so we're hoping that the legislature can help us out with some of that, just giving us tools that we're allowed to use. And then we've had growing pains with our water system, and we had a kind of a painful transition to different water rates this last year. And I'm hoping this coming year it won't be, you know, people will see that it's a reasonable rate system and it's not as scary as it looked last year. And then on the social side of things, you know, everybody at the table talked about behavioral health and access to behavioral health services. I would add to that, affordable housing is in very short supply. I'd say quality affordable housing. So along with that comes quality affordable daycare. I look at the issues that keep people in poverty. One of them is if you have small children, it's almost impossible for you to work outside the home, especially if you're a single parent, because you have nowhere you can afford to take your children for child care. And you want your children to be safe. So child care has been in short supply in Bismarck for many years, but quality child care for low-income families is in extremely short supply. And that situation also closes off a lot of job opportunities to parents. If you're a single parent, it's impossible for you to work a night shift. We find that to be an issue keeping women on the police force and the fire department. You know, they get to a point where they start a family and then it becomes more and more difficult to work shift work. And if you're a single parent, again, whether you're a mom or a dad, it's impossible to work shift work because nighttime daycare is really expensive and really hard to find. And then what I call attainable housing, which is like first-time homebuyer housing. You know, right now, the average first-time homebuyer house in Bismarck costs about $220,000 a year, or about $220,000. And that, to me, doesn't sound very attainable if you're somebody in your mid-20s or early 30s looking to buy your first home. So a lot of the existing stock that's out there needs so much work that people either don't want to take it on or it doesn't qualify for FHA financing because it's in such rough shape. So that's kind of a wide spectrum of issues I see out there.
Well, and I thank you for sharing those things. You know, I think about the kind of the two sides of the same coin, which are in so many ways we're oftentimes faced with doing stopgap stuff, responding, reacting to immediate things, right? And we need to be doing that, and then yet that's different from those longer term endeavors in which we're trying to establish greater sustainability for some measure of quality of life, like affordable housing, like sufficient employment and employment income, like, you know, those kinds of things. And so they're both related, and seeking to kind of keep eyes on both ends of that. Thank you. Is Bismarck growing or stable, or what in terms of population? Okay, that's what I thought, but and in as much as you've got figures at your fingertips, or they seem like they're relevant, if you could share some numbers of, I don't know if you have like, kind of here's how many families we serve, or here's how many contacts we have, or what are those, give us some idea of your organizations, your places. Again, if that works, it's not going to work for everybody, but to give some idea of points of service or families or individuals that are served, or whatever might be fitting as you try to respond to that.
Ministry on the Margins is right now serving just over 1,100 people a week,
Okay.
about 95 volunteers. And, we have a food pantry, we have a clothing pantry, we have variety of support groups and conversation and community happenings. And so that's who we're serving. One of the things that we're noticing we are serving in a growing amount would be the grandparents raising grandchildren. If you go to our food pantry, it would be the increasing group would be the senior citizens raising their grandchildren or great-grandchildren on their own fixed income because the parent is either addicted or incarcerated or gone. That would be a huge group that we're seeing. And so when we talk about it, one of the pieces that we're trying to talk about is, how can we be safe spaces for community to happen for whatever this mixed up, crazy family happens to be right now. Because it may change next week who's in the household. And so 1,100 would be about how many we're serving in our ministry center.
Yep. Wow, thank you. Anybody else have a number that feels?
Jason, maybe you can help confirm this for me, because I don't want to inflate it too much, but hasn't the city grown in population about 20% in the last 10 years?
The last census data was 2010. Bismarck was right about 60,000. Last estimate that we got, which was September of 19, we were at 73,000. So we put on 13,000 people in 10 years.
That's 15+%. Wow.
So with that growing that much, we continue to grow. I think we've grown beyond what the demographers that were doing the housing needs analysis for us a few years expected us to grow the pace that we would continue to grow at. I think they thought with the oil boom things would level off, and we just haven't seen that in Bismarck. We've continued to need classroom space and
So with regard to affordable housing, is there a number that's cited to say, if we waved a magic wand, we need 100, 500, 1,000 more affordable housing sites? I mean, what is that? Or is there such a guesstimate?
We needed 300 affordable housing units, low-income housing units, and we've added probably 100 maybe in the last couple of years. And that's really expensive housing to build. It's expensive to maintain, and so it's slow coming online. Let's see, we needed senior housing. We needed around 200 units, and we've added, I think, about 150 affordable senior units. Those can be a little bit easier to get low-income tax credits for, that kind of thing. So we do have some real quantifiable needs, but again, it's slow bringing that stuff online. What we really don't have is the homes in that first-time home buyer range. That's a hard price range for builders to turn a profit at. And so the sweet spot is up in the 300,000 area, and that's where they build most of their houses.
Sure.
And we have lots more people aging at home, so they're not moving out of that housing stock, so that younger families can buy into it behind them. So we boomers have to move.
Right. Downsides, let go of some of those properties, right? Yeah. Thank you. You were going to share something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the Human Service Center in 2018, I don't have the exact numbers,
Yeah.
but it was over 2,000 first-time
Okay,
clients that we served.
What, 2,000 first-time clients?
Yes.
Yeah, wow.
So that doesn't count the ones that are put into groups and continue to come back week after week and get services from us. And then we started a new electronic health record in March of 2019. So the data that I then have from March of 2019 to, I think we did the cutoff at the end of October of 2019, was over 2,000. So just in an 8-month period, we served more than we served in the entire year of 2018. I'm sure there's several reasons for that, and I could go into them and bore everybody to death, but one of the things is we've rolled out a lot of new statewide initiatives and directives, and that takes time away from staff to learn new things, whether it is an electronic health record or whatever it might be that you're starting up. So those are some of the things that we started that took some staff time, and now that the staff have that down, we're starting to see more folks come in. So and the nice thing about our new electronic health record is we're able to capture some real-time data. Our old health record, it was like 6 months old kind of stuff. So there's just some great things with that, but just efficiencies and the ability to serve more people. We started doing more groups versus individual because we can get more folks in and get them hopefully the help that they need. So just a couple of things that I can throw out.
Yeah, good, thank you. Well, you had some,
Go ahead,
please.
go ahead.
Oh, I was simply going to say that one of the things that we seem to see is kind of this theme, it's a good theme that kind of grows in some of the work that we do, is that there's, and I just describe it this way, is that there's kind of a blurring of lines between faith communities and church and communities, or churches and communities, right? Where we used to have such a distinctiveness and such some barriers that existed there. But rather, I think that increasingly we're seeing more and more places and more settings in which everybody kind of has some recognition. We're all in this together. And so how do we join hands? How do we join forces? How do we try to tap and utilize, gifts and abilities and resources for that betterment of the larger society? So it's a little bit of way of leading into you to, if you would, reflect a little bit on where have you experienced partnerships or the use of volunteers, whether they be with churches or not, or just other individuals. But because a little bit of the dreaming and the wondering here that's going on in Good Shepherd is this question of, as we move forward, right? How is it? It's always our call to ourselves to say, are we invested where we need to be? Are we compassionate and extending that as we're called to? Are we pushing the envelope where that's most needed and those kinds of things? So Good Shepherd does that, right? But sometimes there's things that percolate up that strike the hearts of our congregation members to say, oh my goodness, now that's something we could do something more with or of. So anyway, that's kind of a question. Where have you experienced partnership kinds of things? And or where has some of that stuff seemed to work?
So it's kind of interesting that when I got the letter from you inviting me here, is that I've almost a year and a half serving in my current capacity, and you're the third church to reach out to the police department to see how you can how you can help. I think that's a great thing for the city.
Right. Yep.
And when I saw this, that you're actually having a different kind of meeting, it was a good thing.
Yep.
So I really do think the answer I've given to other people, and I'll give you today, is I don't really know how you can help the police department. I just don't. I can tell you what our needs are and what our problems, and then hopefully you can think of something that will help in the background kind of thing.
Yep.
But one thing that where we see partnerships and things is with the hospitals. We've been working with both hospitals a lot and trying to develop ways to, rather than have that revolving door, get people into the services that they need.
Yeah.
We've been working with well, with Ministry on the Margins and West Central and everybody, just get people on the same page. And everybody is, I'm really excited because we are finally getting to a place where we're going to get a lot of things that we need in the community that we've been wanting for a long time. United Way really stepped up with our homeless issue. Now we need a low barrier shelter where people can actually have a little bit to drink and still have some place they can go. You know, because they're not causing problems, they just need somewhere to go. That's coming close. There's housing issues coming up for people, and those are the kind of partnerships. I wish I could have thought of it myself, but this housing first model that they have is really truly the way to go to get to people. And so they're secure and know that they have some place that they can go to every day.
Yep.
I think those are the good partnerships that our community has developed.
Right. Yeah, good, thank you. Well, and part of that is illuminating those things, like you say, I don't know exactly what those direct connections are, but part of that even is that we want, as congregation members, to be advocates, right? We need to be able to use our voice and our vote sometimes, and to be, sometimes that's in relationship to the things that we're aware about. We hear about the things, we can go, like, I'll speak to that, I'm in support of that, in whatever measure that is. That's a part of how things happen in different settings. So, yeah, good, thanks.
I guess I'm gonna jump on this from a different look.
Yep.
So I did my last 17 years on the street as a patrolman and as a supervisor. And there are things that unknowingly cost us time for officers. We were talking about it a little before we started. Civility, just being good to each other, knowing your neighbors, getting that sort of connectivity. And the point I illustrated was, you call the police because you can't walk 50 feet, knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but your dog's barking.
Yeah.
Can you take your dog in?
Yeah.
So what happens is I show up at your door, tell you to take your dog in.
Right.
Your neighbor complained, now you're mad at your neighbor. I go over to the neighbor says, well, why didn't he just come over here and say something? We've lost that. You don't know how much that happened, and it didn't sound like a lot of time, but 20 minutes out of an officer's shift, over and over and over, racks up to a lot of, simply because we can't be civil. I'll jump on.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's right. It's the time, it's the quality of relationships that we're either investing in or not.
Yes.
And all those things have a byproduct.
And my thing is with the outreach programs, I don't want to digress back to the numbers and stuff, but a lot of the models that are used for these programs start with children. We have to take care of our children first. I'll give you some numbers. I was still with the FOP, but we ran a program called Shop and Cop. It's now called FOP Cops and Kids, so if you want to know why, I'll tell you later. Back in 2015, we met with the school district and used their numbers. There were over 1,600 kids in Bismarck alone that qualified for our program on socioeconomic factors alone.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Not to mention anything else. So you look at something like that, it's not just the homeless we're dealing with. We're talking about a lot of low-income impact that we can change. And we can have a lot of effect on, and we need to start looking at some of that stuff as well.
Yeah. And with those things, a little bit goes a long way. Those contacts, which they don't have to be lifelong, right? But all of those things matter.
Like I said earlier, when we were talking, when I was growing up as a child, we knew everybody for blocks.
Yeah.
Who can say that nowadays? We've lost that ability to connect as a neighborhood, as neighbors, and simply looking out for each other. You want to help us? That our mantra is 73,000 eyes. What impact can that have? And it's passive. report what you see, get to know your neighbors, be neighbors, not just somebody that lives next door. That in and of itself could change the scope of things and the fabric of our community.
Well, what does that look like to really redouble the efforts of a stick a church community, right? And to say that those reminders that part of our role here is to reach out and to be active in knowing our neighbors, right? Well, it sounds small, or it sounds like it's a given, and yet that's what we need. We need these pockets of groups and organizations and churches and communities to take that upon ourselves again to say, oh yeah, that's a part of what we're going to do on purpose. Is now we're going to send y'all out, and your job is smile at a neighbor. You know, I mean, it's all those things. Again, they matter cumulatively. How are we invested? How are we connected?
The chief will talk about the churches that we've partnered with, and in my world, in crime prevention, unfortunately, what we've been dealing with is church security.
Oh, sure.
That's a big thing nowadays,
Yep.
and there are some that have taken off and have they're leaps and bounds ahead of what we would expect. But had us come in because there's a different piece to it. It's not just protecting your church; it's what happens when we show up.
Mm-hmm.
How do you interact with us? Because the sash that says church security means nothing to me. You're a guy with a gun. Those types of things that add a level of safety and security to your program. It's sad that we've had to come to this, but it is what we're dealing with, and we're very proactive with the churches that have that and want our expertise and guidance on it.
Yeah. Good.
Very, very related with that, because it's one of the pieces that we're finding happening more at the Ministry Center. You know, how do you do that dance of due diligence and security and safety? And we all, believe in that. You have to do that. And yet one of the things that I think churches are called to bring is that neighborhood community building, or I sometimes call it like safe spaces for community to happen. We now, down at the ministry, we now host 3 12-step groups that used to meet in different churches around Bismarck. And they came to us, and one would be a pornography anonymous group. And they said, you know, we can no longer meet because we would have a person who would be a registered sex offender coming to the group, and it would be against the 12 steps to limit who can come. But the church has a policy of who can come and can't come. So we're now hosting 3 groups that used to be in churches. And I think it's a challenge for churches maybe to safely, I don't want to go safely, but to safely welcome back the ugly and dirty people, the sinners, you know?
For sure.
And how are we going to be those spaces?
Yeah.
And then allow community to happen.
Yeah.
I think similar to that, if from the churches, I do a lot with the prison reentry and that history, if the churches could help their members to step up and say, I am willing to offer or interview somebody for a job who has a felony. And it would be really good to have other people here, and you can come together and support each other and talk about what that means and how it's working or not working. I have an apartment building. I have, I am willing to consider renting to somebody who has a felony.
Right.
And again, I think they can find in the churches the encouragement, the vision, and the support to do that which is not currently happening very well in our community. That's my second. My third one would be to be a place of calling forth professionals who are just at the cusp of retiring, and just our leadership of volunteers would be people who have just retired. They take about a year to get over burnout, and then they want to do something of significance.
Amen.
And so what could be of significance, be it some business personnel putting together a mini loan program that made loans of $100 available, which could be a game changer for someone. Then they could purchase the carpenter's apron to get the job. You know? I think the generative possibility around that age group is huge.
You bet. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Other ideas or reflections on the matter of, kind of partnership or connecting?
So just in the last year, the city renewed their strategic plan. In fact, Jason was our project manager on that effort, and he did a really terrific job. So out of that came this call for projects that I believe is going to be an annual event, and it was so fascinating. Real briefly, it was just a call out to the community for projects that people had. It could be just a seed of an idea, or it could be something that was ready to roll, and whether they felt that the city could partner with them in some manner. Like, did they need funding? Did they need a fiscal agent? Did they need just support and endorsement? And actually, I think we got a couple of projects that pertain to were more closely aligned with Parks and Rec, and so we were happy to pass that on to them, or to the school system, or we could pass it on to them. But it was fascinating. I think we got 15 projects.
We're 15 total, 11 that pitched their ideas to the commissioners, and of the 11, 3 got funding, and some are still working, and we're already talking about doing it again in May of this year.
Right, and some of those things, we would look at funding in our next budget cycle. Now, so for example, one of the projects that did get funded, this was really a sea change for city government in Bismarck. United Way's homeless shelter had purchased a new building. They had not been able to stay open during the daytime, so anybody who was showing up there at night needing a place to stay had to leave by a certain time in the morning and be gone all day, because they just didn't have funding to have anyone there during the daytime. So that meant there was nobody there doing case management with residents, helping them connect to services, find jobs, find housing. That was all happening in the evening time, as the existing staff had time to do it, and maybe that's not their expertise either. So the city funded in our budget that just went into effect on January 1, $250,000 this year to fund that daytime programming. And so they'll, this is not going to be an annual thing. They'll have to reapply for it every year. So, I'm so hopeful that this is going to make a huge difference at the shelter and make a huge difference with the clients that come through there, because the shelter is really not very effective without that kind of case management. And we do have our eye out for partnering on social detox. Our public health director, Renee Mock, has been in partnership with, it's now the Burley Morton Behavioral Health Coalition. Started out as the mayor's Gold Star Task Force. And this coalition is made up of all sorts of, not just behavioral health professionals, but health professionals and social service professionals in both counties. And so with the funding that came out from the legislature this last year, we're seeing lots of activity now, new activity directed at behavioral health. So we're hoping that things coming online over at West Central Human Services are going to help us out in the social detox area, and if there's still a need, you know, maybe there's a partnership to be had there and we can help fund beds there. We also need medical respite. You'd be amazed at the number of people who are discharged from the hospital into homelessness. And so it would be United Way's wish to have those facilities in their new building when their addition is built onto it. So in that call for projects, the city can help partner on these things with in-kind services, direct funding, support or endorsement, or maybe there's an ordinance that needs to be passed in order to allow the project to go forward. So those are ways that we can work with organizations in the city.
Nice, thank you.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I've heard it a couple times, the term social detox. Right here, is that a familiar term to anybody? Chief, do you want to maybe touch on that just a little bit about what that means for the police department, what that means for the healthcare provider?
Yeah, thank you.
And what social detox, the goal, what that looks like when we're done here?
I'm not using it right.
No, you're on the right spot, and the commissioner guy said it too, and it's a term some of us have heard again and again over the months, but it's a new phrase. I think it's a key piece to
Yes, it is.
touch on.
Yeah, good, thanks.
So what we need is to help the police department, and obviously I'm selfish for the police department because that's where we're but we end up dealing with people that they're not really, they don't need to be at the hospital, they don't need to be in jail, but we have nowhere to take them. And if a lot of times they can't go to the shelter if they've been drinking, okay? I know Jenna, she's got the heart, huge heart, she lets people in there once in a while, but they just can't if somebody's not, doesn't need to be detoxed or watched, but they're still causing a little bit of problems. They're not going to let them in. They have nowhere to go. And we need some place where we can take people in that condition. There are a fair amount of people in our city that we can offer them services all day long, 7 days a week, and they're not going to accept them. But they still need, we as police officers cannot leave them out in elements like tonight or something. You know, we got to find something. Sometimes we take them to the police department, you know, or we buy them some coffee somewhere, and until somebody calls them, we'll take them to the next place. We can't. That's not the right way. It wastes our time, and it takes away from us being proactively be out protecting our city. And if we could get some place that we can take people in, I keep looking over at Brad over here. He's very close to getting us and we're this close. So I'm looking forward to that. And I hope that answers what you were
Can
looking
you
for.
touch on just a little bit about the time officers end up spending in the emergency room because they're caught in that purgatory between hospital and jail?
Yeah, and with the sheriff here, I'm not going to say what I usually say.
Pretty quiet tonight.
But all seriousness, and you'll agree with me, he doesn't want people at the jail, and they shouldn't be there. But, so what happens is right now, depending on the condition of the person that our officers come in contact with, they need to be cleared at the emergency room before they can go out to the jail to be held. And that takes, depending on how busy the emergency room is, that can take an hour, it could take longer. Sometimes it's not as long, but it's also disruptive for the hospitals, so they get tired of it. And it's just a big mess. So I think we figured it out in time. In a year, you know, it was $200,000-$300,000 of time we were spending on officers just to get people cleared at the hospital and get them someplace safe. And that we could put a lot of effort in a lot of different areas if we didn't have to do that.
What do you think about the potential investment of those kinds of funds into, what is that, a center, a gathering place, a something, right? That's more of that kind of in-between place to be, but it's not as severe as some of the other settings. And is there kind of a community energy for that sort of a conversation? Jennifer?
And I think, you know, just to add to that comment, that's where we, you know, at the hospital, a lot of times we will just admit them because they're a familiar face. We know what's going on. I mean, to his comment, it's typically the same people, and they're those that don't want the help to, quit using a substance of some sort, but if we had a place where they could go, that would be helpful, and it will free up beds. We've been extremely busy, which anybody that's been in the ER or anywhere in the clinic or the hospital as of late, it's been extremely busy now with influenza season, et cetera. And with folks like that end up coming in, they end up tying up a bed that really could be utilized for someone in medical need of those things too. So that would be very helpful.
Right, yeah, thank you.
I think that, so again, I usually have an opportunity to check these kinds of things out before I come to a panel like this, but maybe the chief can keep me from misquoting something here. Didn't you estimate it was about $240,000 in manpower spent on homeless and intoxication management is what they called it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was I think the numbers were 2017, 2018. I'm sure they're
Not insignificant. Right.
Now, these officers would be out there patrolling anyway, so this isn't $240,000
Yeah.
extra dollars,
Yep.
but that's
Still
a big,
resources that.
it is, it's a big
Right.
slice out of your budget, and they could certainly be doing maybe higher priority things.
I want to give opportunity too to, as we've been, y'all have been listening, is there something that you want to either comment on or ask a question about or circle back to that has piqued your imagination a little bit or feels like it's something that we want to dive a little bit more deeply into in the last few minutes here?
What is it that if we have about experience with that, if that individual does not want to be there, does not want to go to the detox, does not want to just keep saying go back, does not, the person has to want to get better. Bring themselves up. It could happen, but the individual has to want to do it. You cannot force them to do it when they won't. And that's what you see. We see a lot of them. I'm sure the police department, they see a lot of that happen. It's like they get to and they just go back.
I think that's where building relationships helps a lot, and maybe Chief, you could talk about your partnership with Ministry on the Margins.
Well, I'll jump in there real quick. And so kind of to bring this full circle, I come from a family of addiction. So I understand addiction very well, and we deal with it on a big scale in our jail. And I've had the question throughout the years, by a lot of different groups when they say, of the percentage in the jail, how many are affected by addiction? And I would say honestly 100%. Whether it's them that's addicted or them coming from a family of addiction. And so, I'll agree to a point on that, but I believe this. I believe most people don't want to be addicted. I would say almost everybody. But kind of the same of what we're talking about, we've got a lot of partnerships in our jail. We bring Heartview in, we bring Native American groups in to work with our Native American inmates. When you say numbers, right now we're housing about 240 inmates, 284 inmates in our jail. When I started 30 years ago, we housed about 20. Those 20, we could have left the doors unlocked at night and they would have been there in the morning. The 280 we're housing now are very, very dangerous people because of addiction, mental health, those types of things. So, we have we started a chaplain program in our jail to provide that spiritual side in the jail. And I think, what I see is lacking, and like I said earlier, some of what we see, we're the least equipped or prepared to deal with in our profession. But, you know, we put people in our jail and then we let them back out into the same environment that put them in that jail in the first place. You know, and we're not going to solve this overnight, you know, and we've got a very transient population in our jail. But I want to share a quick story if I can. And I think this is what I see as lacking. And it's kind of a personal story. My wife's cousin, a female, started dating a guy, and you can just picture it. He has tattoos everywhere, on his face, everywhere. And, you know, he's dating in this family, a very conservative Christian North Dakota family. And you can imagine kind of that shock value when this guy comes in with tattoos all over his face. And very talented tattoo artist. But his father brought him up here. He was abandoned by his parents, raised by family member or by distant family. His dad invited him to come up to help in the tattoo studio, and Dad ripped him off basically because Dad's a meth addict. And so this guy retaliated how he knew how. You know, he grew up in a violent culture with no love and support. So he fought back whenever somebody did something to him, until he got into this family with my wife's relatives, and they actually mentored and told him, this isn't how you do things. And to see the transformation in this guy is unbelievable, because he just got baptized with his daughter. And, you know, to see where he was 3 years ago to see where he is today, and it was that constant mentoring. But real quick, and then I'll pass the mic. When he got baptized, he said to the minister, and the minister got permission to share this later with the family. He said, "Are you sure you got enough water to wash my sins away?" But the guy is awesome now, and that's where I think, as we've talked tonight, I think, you know, more and more, the government can't fix these people. We have to start looking out for our neighbors. Everybody's kind of said the same thing. You know, some of the least of our society is what we got to start doing the most for, or we're not going to fix the problems.
Amen. Well, and some of that, thank you for sharing that. Some of that too, you know, I think is churches to reclaim. That's our job. That's our role. You know, is that role of forgiving and redeeming and helping and loving and all those kinds of things. And I think we've had a little bit too sanitized. And part of that call is to be in that mess of stuff, bringing good news and a good path and relationships and those kinds of things. And at our best, we can be pretty well suited to do that. Certainly more so, right, than some of the other settings, right, than a jailhouse or even a hospital or whatever, as much as they're doing some of that stopgap stuff, some of the assistance. But I think part of that is because we've not, as churches, as faith communities, we've not claimed that as being central to our role. Yeah,
So I just wanted to make a few comments.
Please, yeah.
I'm going to try to wrap some of this up and not ramble too much, but one of the things we did with the human service centers across the state is we did some strategic planning 2 years ago, and one of the things we really focused on was the social determinants of health and how we could touch people in those different entities, if you will, and how we could also meet them where they're at. So client-centered, client-focused, stage-based. So no matter if somebody is not wanting service, how can we engage them to make our services a little more attractive? So prior to coming to Bismarck, I lived in Fargo and worked there for a number of years. But my most recent job was with the Human Service Center in Fargo. And we completely revamped our substance use disorder program to where we wanted to be very inviting. And one of the ways we had to do that is we picked up some tips from some evidence-based programs that talked about offering stage-based programming, which meant whether somebody was pre-contemplative or contemplative, or where they were in their stage of recovery, that's where we would meet them. and that's where we would treat them. So if someone's pre-contemplative, our dosing was much less than if somebody was in the maintenance stage or in the stage where they wanted the help, so to speak, right? So engagement and a lot of that went on at the pre-contemplative stage. And so we had to really revamp our services because if you think back on how addiction services were offered years ago, and I'll share a little personal information here, but I'm a person in long-term recovery. I do have to say thank you to Good Shepherd because in 1981, the first AA meeting I attended was in this church. So I'm a graduate of Heartview Foundation in 1981. I was 19 years old and had hair down to here and an attitude to match. And I came in these doors and I was welcomed. And I think that's why people come back, right? I'm sure if I'd have came in and been a negative experience, you probably would have never seen me again and Heartview would have kicked me out and all that stuff. But one of the things I've talked to our staff about is we're not going to kick people out of services, right? We don't even use that language anymore. Now, if somebody needs a break and needs to, come back and when they're a little more, want to engage us a little bit more, so be it. But we're always trying to engage them, always trying to we wanted to be a program of attraction versus a program of distraction or re-traumatization, if you will. So we've really had to foster our partnerships too with law enforcement, the hospitals, the community. We really look to partner with, we even have contracts with Dakota Foundation, Pride Foundation, Youth Works. We contract with them to offer sort of like-mind services, if you will. So when you get into some of the case management, those kinds of things, I can't hire enough staff to do everything. So we do, with our state money, we use it for some contracted service. We've also entered into some MOAs and MOUs, memorandums of agreement, memorandums of understanding with different entities throughout Bismarck so that we can work together. And so they can call us up and say, hey, remember we have that MOA where you were going to come down and offer some case management here at this location, and that's one of the things we're trying to do. So we really value those partnerships. We've really started to partnership more with the schools and trying to go into some of the schools that are in maybe a little bit more high-need areas where families don't have as many resources as some of the other families. And then we just put a counselor right in that school and trying to mentor the schools to maybe take a look at that model so that they can, because I can't put a counselor in every school, I don't have enough staff. So the schools have to look at how can they help share resources too. So I did talk about support groups, I did talk about, if there's volunteers, and I don't think we're as good at volunteering maybe as we used to be too, so that's something maybe some of all of us, myself included, have to get back to a little bit more. I did want to comment briefly on withdrawal management and social detox because there is some confusion around that, and I understand it. For us, at the Human Service Center, social detox is a level of licensed care, of service that we can deliver. We can't deliver medical detox. The hospitals do that. So if somebody needs medical detox because they have a history of severe withdrawal or they look like they're going to go into some severe withdrawal, I'd rather have them at the hospital than at my facility because then we're going to have to ambulance them over, right? So we try to get folks cleared at the hospital, which takes time, and then get them into our facility, which is social detox, which means they can't be going through any form of severe withdrawal, but they can have some product on board, if you will, and we have to kind of manage them through that. They can't have very much, so it would be nice to have a withdrawal management unit, which we don't have here in Bismarck, which would be a step up from the social detox and sort of a step in between the medical withdrawal. We've gone to Fargo, we've toured their facilities out there, we've looked at them, we've tried to bring some of that information back and have had meetings about it, and I think we're hopefully still going to look at pursuing that, but what we're doing on our end is trying to enhance our emergency services and enhance our social detox so that it is there and a little bit more readily available. Because right now, our crisis services and our residential services are in the same building, and it's full all the time. So I can't get any crisis people in there because I'm always full of residential. So if what we're looking at doing is shortening the stay of some of our residential folks so that we can bring more crisis folks in. That's why I mentioned earlier, what do we do with our residential folks who need a little bit longer supportive stay to kind of get their recovery going again, whether, like I said, whether it's mental illness or substance use. I call behavioral health because 90-some% of our clients have both, and we deal with some very chronic, long-term folks, so we realize they're going to probably be with us for a while. But we also have people who get well, so we also have to have that maintenance end of it in place too, where we can do the handoff, whether it's to support groups or peer recovery type folks or whatever that might be. But that's also important. So there are some pieces, there are some gaps that are out there that we're trying to address and get after a little bit. The other gap that I probably didn't mention was our youth services when it comes to our younger children, and then of course our youth under 18, getting them behavioral health services. And I'm not going to speak for all of DHS, but I know there's a need for foster homes and foster parents and trained, licensed foster care, which is a huge need because, again, as you've seen things increase on the adult side with more violent offenders and whatnot, we're also seeing an increase with some of our youth who are having more struggles and more problems and a little more hard to handle, and a lot of the foster parents are like, I'm not dealing with that, or they're not trained, so we're really trying to work with them and get them. It's not an area of our expertise, but we do have departments within DHS that deal with that, work with that. They work with Lutheran social services and whatnot. So anyway, those are just, again, some gap areas that are important, and I'm sure everyone's well aware of some of the other initiatives that we're working on statewide, but those are just a few that I can think of right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm moved by all the different touch points of all of what it is that you do with people's lives in so many different settings in the Bismarck and broader area, and how much is going on, right? I mean, all these different ways in which needs are being met and responded to, some with efficiencies that we'd like to have look differently, right? And then some, right, that are resulting in the intended goal and outcomes, which is people's lives being helped and encouraged and those kinds of things. So, wow, thank you. Maybe just the last minute, and then I know Jason's going to kind of wrap up with a couple words here too, would be, what do you feel particularly hopeful about? I don't know, is there something that just kind of gets you feeling, when you see it happen, or you get to participate in it, or that dream emerges a little bit, what's just one thing that you say, man, that helps me to keep coming back? What in your niche, what might that be?
I guess I can start out with that, just to kind of tack on with partnerships too, into what Brad had mentioned. We were approached by Simile Middle School also to help with the kids, and meet them basically where they're at, because behavioral health services are so sparse in our community, and trying to find, ease of access for, especially with families with kids and, the single parents or whatever that is, where they are not able to get off of work and, come with their kids to an appointment. So we actually have a psychologist in the Simile Middle School now that is there 1 day a week. We're looking to grow that now into 2 days a week, just because it's been received so well. And I think, to look at what is where I'm looking to go and where I think I'm the most passionate is that with, the legislative movements and stuff that we've had this year, and with the 11 bills that they passed to really focus on behavioral health in North Dakota, I think is huge. I'm excited for Sanford to be a part of that, and I appreciate, our relationships with the Department of Human Services as well. We have a very good working relationship with them, and I think we are excited to see where we can, grow and help our community, whether that's in the school system or, or even telehealth services. Like, is there a possibility that we can look at doing some telehealth so that it's not actually a physical body in the room, but yet we are still reaching those communities such that are in need where we can, without having to make people travel and get to where they're going, so.
All right, nice. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Anyone else?
I think just to echo what a few others said earlier, the fact that we're sitting in a church
Yeah.
having these conversations,
Yeah.
that excites me.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, and I don't want to be the doomsayer, but we can throw a lot of government money at problems, and what do we end up with? No money and more problems, sometimes is what I see. And I think, the getting back and taking it over and getting involved and getting to know our neighbors and fixing the problems, I'm glad to be here because I think this is how we fix it.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
I think that what I'm really hopeful about is the traction started by the legislature last year with programs that they are funding at a level, and new programs that weren't there before, but funding at a level that we've never seen before in terms of behavioral health and mental health. And I think that's incredibly important. So I'm really looking forward to see how all of this kind of comes together over the next year, and then what needs are left unmet beyond that. I'm excited for organizations like Ministry on the Margins. I remember when you started out, Sister Kathleen, and it was just a little tiny bit of stuff you were doing, and so I am extremely grateful, and it makes me hopeful when I see her organization blossom. But at the same time, we should all be really, really concerned that she is helping 1,100 people a week, because there is a level of poverty in our state and in our community that I don't think we see, and we kind of don't want to see, and we don't want to recognize. So I think we need to, open our eyes and look around and figure out how we can help our neighbors in that situation. I can vouch for volunteering at Ministry on the Margins. It's great fun. You'll feel really good. All the clients you help are treated with great dignity, as they should be. And so I highly recommend it. And also at the Soup Cafe, same thing. I love going there and helping. Now that I'm retired, I can do more of that. But the one thing that I'm really excited about is we just passed minimum habitability standards for rental properties in Bismarck. We had them up until about 2005-04. We adopted the I love having Jason here. He's like my Jeopardy answer guy. Anyway, we adopted the International Building Code, and when we did that, we took a huge chunk of our city ordinances and did away with them and replaced them with this building code. Unbeknownst to us, we got rid of our minimum habitability standards for rental properties, and this International Building Code doesn't cover that. So we had nothing to address complaints from renters who are often low income, living in very, very substandard conditions, paying high rent because they have, poor credit, or they have a criminal history or whatever. So we got the habitability standards back, and I'm hoping now that we get some of these situations taken care of. So I'm excited about that.
Okay, nice. Back up to par a little bit there. Anyone else with a last thought or word, image, idea? It's kind of like we can go on and on, right? I mean, but please, if you want to.
Okay, I just wanted to share a couple things, and kind of want to echo what Nancy said. This last legislative session, it was my second time testifying to the legislature, and probably one of the easiest times I've had testifying to the legislature. The first time was like right after I started my job, so I was only like a month into it, but the preparation that we put into it this time and the support that we got from our legislative body, and then also the fact that, again, behavioral health doesn't care, your denomination, it doesn't care your political affiliation, doesn't matter, right? But now we have a governor and a first lady who really have taken on behavioral health and have been able to sit down with us and try to learn about it and understand it. Just, they have some personal ties to it also, but that gives me a lot of hope. When you have leadership that understands behavioral health and is willing to come out and address that in a more open manner and try and erase some of the stigma that surrounds it is very important.
Big part of the battle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to share that I'm very hopeful about the direction we're going. I don't know what's going to happen in the next legislative session, but we hope that it's good because that's all we have to offer is hope.
Yep, nice, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, just really tremendous perspectives and stories and services, so thank you. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to, on a personal level, but then also on behalf of the long-range planning team, the church council, which we've got some of us here, Pastor Craig, Pastor Julie, she's been running around here somewhere, Pastor Bob, he's downstairs wrangling all the youth, there's youth room tonight, so if you want to see what the other half of this church went upstairs, and there's a bunch of kids running around having a good time. So we heard some really neat things that we didn't hear this afternoon. I think kudos goes out to you. There were twice as many people here this afternoon. I got 6 pages of notes. I have 5 pages of notes from the 7 of you. So well done. You guys did great. So we've got a lot to pick through. Tim's going to help us with a lot of this data and figure out what's next. And as I mentioned earlier, we'd like to carry on this narrative and keep you guys in the loop and continue to share what we're learning. I feel that there's a big thing coming from Good Shepherd. We don't know what it looks like now, but we're one of the biggest churches in the community, one of the biggest churches in the ELCA. I think with that we have a little responsibility too. This is my hometown. This is where I'm from, and if there's things that we can do that will help this town get even better, that's what we're here to help, here to learn. So again, thank you on behalf of everybody here. Appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
So I can close this with a word of prayer. Just because that's what the pastor does, right? Fly in at the end, right? Good and great God, we give thanks for this night. We give thanks for the brothers and sisters that gathered tonight. Bless them in their leadership in our community. May it be led in a way that helps all people see that they are created in the image of God. They are loved unconditionally by God, and there's always enough water to clear their sins away. We give thanks for the work that we get to do together as public and private and now faith community entities, try to talk and learn and see where you might be leading us down the road. Bless us and give us good rest tonight so that we can arise in the morning to share your love with everyone that you put us in contact with as we live out this journey called faith. All that's on our hearts this day, God, and all days we lift you in worship and praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. You're welcome to boogie out of here. I'm sure for some conversation if you'd like to stay, and I think there's
Again, you see my husband more than me. There you
Idea is attractive. Can I take the risk?